Well, good evening once again, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for joining me for this evening's look into the Holy Book Devotional. Thank you for being with me. And, I've acknowledged before those who are faithful listeners from other states. But tonight I just want to recognize those that are my neighbors and those that have given me such kind remarks after the devotional. So I can't name everybody, but just a few: Jim and Norita, um, Chris and Lauren, um, Ken, and so many others. So I just want to thank all of you and all of you out there for joining me this evening. Um, do you stress over the end times? Well, I hope you don't, but that's the title of our devotional this evening. In every age, it seems like, since the ministry of Jesus Christ and his ascension into heaven, a lot of people have looked at the end times as being just around the corner. Paul and the many newly converted Christ followers thought that the Messiah would return during their lifetime. Now, over the course of man's history since that time, some men have lived in fear, worried and stressed, and uh, devised hoaxes to take advantage of others, and planted the idea in people's heads that the horrors of the apocalypse would lead to a time on earth when human beings would be reduced to lowly creatures in competition with the other animals just to survive. The people who make movies and use the theme of the apocalypse have made a lot of money. Now, the belief that the world as we know it will someday end is not only in the mind of Christians, but just about everyone who lives with the notion that nothing lasts forever, and not even this world. But we Christ followers have an advantage that non-believers don't, and that is we know how things are going to turn out. And we know the signs that will come first before the end times. I think it's kind of interesting and a reflection on the many people who are negatively influenced by disheartening world events and wars and conflicts and natural disasters, and people who do not seem to hold a high value for human life. And because of that gloomy attitude, some people walk around with this perpetual cloud over their heads. I've taught the book of Revelation several times, and I've read with interest and really with excitement too John's writings, excuse me, of Christ's visions that he shared with the apostle. Images of horrible things that those not removed from the earth doing during the rapture will have to endure. But let's return to the here and now for a moment. There seems to be more and more written lately about comparisons between the end times prophecy and the things that are happening, well, let's say in the White House in Washington, even with the president, who some see as a precursor to the Antichrist, if not the Antichrist himself. They have cherry-picked and chosen verses from Isaiah and Ezekiel and even Revelations to show how quickly world events are bringing about the apocalypse and how the things that are happening mimic the signs of the end times. Now, there are a couple of things that these harbingers of doom are seeming to forget, though. Even though we may be seeing the pains of the end times, no one knows when the end will come, of course, and only the unsaved will suffer the horrors of the tribulation and beyond. Even more than that, the birth pains of the end times may last a very, very long time. The best way to deal with that is to be ready, not have to hurry to get ready. when we talk about the end times, and it is my hope that none of us are obsessed with that subject, by the way, but it is good to know what the Bible, what the biblical signs are that we are given. Signs that clearly stated just how the end times are going to come about. Now here is what the Bible says about some of these things. Here are some of the signs. And number one, there will be a rise in very influential false teachers. Matthew 24, verse 45 says, "Watch out, for many will try to deceive you, for many will come in my name, claiming I am the Messiah, and will deceive many." Number two, there will be moral decay and decline. 2 Timothy says in chapter 3, verses 3 and 4, people will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, without self-control, brutal, not lovers of good. Number three, there will be wars, conflict, and talk of war. Matthew 24:5 says very clearly, there will be war and rumors of war, but the end is still to come. And number four, there will be more natural disasters. Luke 21:11 says there will be great earthquakes and pestilence and famine in various places. And five, there will be persecutions of Christians per Matthew 24:9. And we're seeing that all the time in our world now. Number six, there will be a superhuman effort to get the gospel out to all nations. And number seven, there will be a rise of the one world order. Now, critics are crying that the president is forming alliances all over the world toward that end, using the peace process as the beginning. You know, the one world order is spoken of in Revelations 13. And number eight, technology aligns with prophecy. You know, no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark. That certainly doesn't exclude technology that eliminates the need for God or man, for instance, artificial intelligence that we've heard so much about. And there will be lawlessness, or if that isn't obvious. Number nine, there will be a rebirth of the state of Israel, and all Jews will be called to return. As you recall, Israel became a state in 1948. Ezekiel 1 speaks to this. Number 10, the church will become apathetic. How many churches today preach the prosperity doctrine or deliberately leave out the sacrificial significance of Christ's death and resurrection? Now, a very relevant biblical prophecy came to us from the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39. There are also mentioned in Revelations 20, verses 7 to 10. But listen to what Ezekiel has to say. He says that Gog, and that's not God, that's Gog, G-O-G, is described as a leader of a vast army, a coalition of nations that will attack Israel from the north in the last days. Magog is identified as the place where Gog comes from. Gog is portrayed as a great adversary who will be defeated by the power of God, illustrating his power and sovereignty over nations. In the book of Revelation, there will be a similar account where Gog and Magog are nations that will rise up against God and his saints at the end of the millennium. This is the final battle and the ultimate defeat after Satan has been released from his 1,000-year imprisonment. And still, we as a nation may very well be experiencing these birth pains of the end times right now. And yet many are blind to the slow, subtle words of people who have passed themselves off as benevolent and caring leaders for the disenfranchised. They are no more they are no more than disciples of socialism or communism and destroyers of all that this nation was founded on. Freedom of speech, freedom to choose. And one of the sayings that came out of the devastating attacks of 9/11 was the phrase, "We shall never forget." Well, if you just look around right now, we have representatives in Washington who detest this country, who want to establish Sharia law and want to see Israel wiped off the map. You know, our greatest ally in the Middle East is Israel. Well, and these same people support radical Islamic terrorists and their radical ideas. And one of those who support radical Islam is getting ready to lead the largest and the most financially influential city in the United States. Lest we forget, this radical, whose brothers killed over 3,000 innocent people in New York 23 years ago, has immense support from the very same people who said, we must never forget. Now, I don't want you to take me for someone who remembers atrocities and never forgives, because I find forgiveness in my heart. I pray for forgiveness all the time, and I pray that others will forgive me. However, our Christian responsibility to forgive doesn't mean that we have to forget. Certainly there are consequences for sin even after forgiveness has been given, just as King David came to realize. Now, this prophecy regarding the battle between Gog and Magog, or the battle involving Gog and Magog, of course, is yet to come. The passages describing this are found in Jeremiah 6:22 to 26 if you want to look those up. But look at the signs that are already clearly evident. Persecution of our churches was obvious during the recent COVID epidemic, when the government closed by order all of the churches and left the strip clubs open. Lawlessness is rampant in the streets of many cities today, and local and city and state government leaders are hindering or preventing the government's help in stopping this crime. Criminals are being protected by weak attorneys general, and average citizens are becoming lawbreakers as they are being encouraged to harm peace officers of the law, or sometimes even worse. You know, the United States is influential enough in the world that what we do here seems to be followed by much of the other parts of the world. And as our morals deteriorate, so does the standard of much of the rest of the world. There's no doubt that we, that is the United States, as leaders of the free world, are in serious trouble. Socialism, Marxism are influencing social order, and leftist agendas are trying to blur the natural order of the separation of the sexes, a basic moral and biblical absolute. So as we wait for Gog and Magog in the final battle for the state of Israel and for the world, we, the people of the United States, and all Christians everywhere, must unite to support our Jewish brothers and sisters. For it is said in the book of Genesis, God will bless those who bless Israel, and God will curse those who curse Israel. Those who support the Israel state of Israel, are traditionally allies when it comes to our support. However, it is easy to see that there are alliances being formed that could pose a very serious threat to the United States, Europe, and our ally Israel, who have managed to maintain their identity over thousands of years. Bible prophecy says the threat to Israel will come from the north. We usually think that is the rogue nation of Iran, but look further north. That may include Turkey and Russia, even North Korea and China. But Israel will not only survive, persevere, but she will endure. This is God's will for his people, a people that he will embrace even through the tribulation after, and leave the door open for his prodigal son. Now Amos 9:9 in part says, God will sift the house of Israel among all nations, like corn is sifted from a sieve, yet shall not the least one grain fall upon the earth. In other words, God will preserve and protect his remnant, and he will bless those who hold them dear to their hearts. So what are we left with after all of this? For sure, we as Christian followers, Christ followers, must remain vigilant as to the events that happen around the world. To be informed has its power advantages. But we as Christ followers must also remain faithful to our calling, and that is to live a Christ-like life and to share the good news of the gospel. You know, there's no need to dwell on the signs of the coming final judgment, because we already have our names written in the Lamb's Book of Life, the book that serves as a get-out-of-hell-free card. We will always be under the umbrella of protection that God has promised his children. His children, us. So why worry? Worry is for those who have not yet accepted Christ as their Savior. 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast all your anxiety on him, for he cares for you. You know, the world is in a real mess right now. And our country is going through the pains of a reform movement that is causing much ill will and criticism. So there is no need to take seriously all of these things that are comparing the government or its leaders to doomsday prophecies. The Antichrist has not made himself known yet, and although the Jews have been called back to Jerusalem, the temple is far from being rebuilt. So let's not dwell on the negative aspects of the end times, because God has not been taken by surprise about anything that's happening in this world today, or for that matter, in our personal lives and struggles. I know it is a well-worn statement, but it's true. God is in control, and we're not. So in conclusion for this evening, I believe that this is a mantra that we can all, and we should all, live by. It is far better to be ready than having to hurry to get ready. Thank you, faithful followers, for joining me this evening. I know I'm in competition with sports and everything else, but our numbers are growing, and I am humbled to be able to say thank you. And please join me again next Thursday for the Look into the Book Devotional. I'm your host, Charles Logan, wishing you a very pleasant evening and the week to come. May God bless each and every one, and I will say good night.